Welcome to What's Your Edge, a series of VisionEdge Marketing podcasts dedicated to helping you use data, analytics, process, and measurement to create a competitive edge for you and a superior experience for your customers. I'm your host, Laura Patterson, President of VisionEdge Marketing, and today I'm joined by Doug Norton, Chief Marketing Officer of Inspire Semiconductor, a company founded in the early days of the pandemic that's now launching its groundbreaking Thunderbird supercomputer cluster on a chip. Doug is a veteran of the semiconductor space, and with Doug's help, we're going behind the scenes to talk about what it really takes to get a new, complex product to market, and how mapping the right ecosystem and focusing on customer needs and measuring what matters can make or break a product launch. Please join me in welcoming Doug to What's Your Edge. Doug, we're so glad to have you. And you joined InspireSemi at a critical juncture. And one of the first things you did was make a strategic decision not to chase everyone, but to focus on market segments that were underserved. As you know, we believe that segmentation and customer centricity are critical to the success of launching a new product. Can you walk us through your process for mapping the ecosystem, selecting your initial target markets, and how you decided which segments and partners to prioritize?
Sure. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here, and I'm happy to share some of this good stuff. You're exactly right. The very first thing I sought to do was to determine the markets we would, and just as importantly, would not go after. Believe it or not, the initial target for what ultimately became our Thunderbird was crypto mining. Our founder and CTO saw a lucrative opportunity for some undervalued altcoins due to the focus on Bitcoin. So he initially created an ASIC, which is an application-specific integrated circuit, for a couple of these algorithms. It was a technical success, but for just a short time, since unlike Bitcoin, the altcoins constantly change their algorithms, making something application-specific a dead end, of course. This convinced him what was needed was a very versatile and easy to program chip that, of course, also needed to be very energy efficient if you're going to profitably mine crypto. So our CEO, who was an advisor at the time, saw the potential for this to be a much broader and more significant device. So they brought me on shortly thereafter, given my background in AI and HPC, which stands for High Performance Computing. So my favorite business book is called Blue Ocean Strategy. I highly recommend it. And I
like it too. It's a great book.
It is. It really is. So I suspected the right answer was not to chase the bright, shiny object of AI like everyone else, since that is a very red ocean. Think sharks chumming the water. So just as important, I have partnered with NVIDIA in the past and know better than to compete head-on with them. They are definitely a powerhouse, as everybody probably knows now that they've topped $4 trillion in market share. So what I could see happening, though, was the HPC market, who invented and drove the hardware and software infrastructure AI now leverages, was being left with few options as all the chip companies rushed to cash in on AI. HPC encompasses important applications that are used every day in the real world for engineering, science, and manufacturing. Areas like computer-aided engineering, finding and producing energy, both renewable and oil and gas, vehicle crash simulation and analysis, genomics, pharmaceutical, financial modeling, nuclear fission and fusion simulations, climate and weather modeling, and cybersecurity. Just really important real-world applications. And the underlying common denominator for all of these is they're big math problems. So they have to have highly accurate math, which requires what's called double precision floating point, also known as FP64. Meanwhile, all the GPU players and AI chips were chasing very low precision math that Gen AI LLMs require. Currently 8-bit, now moving to 4-bit, just very low, not useful for much of anything else except generating tokens.
Okay, so it explains kind of the evolution. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that with this product coming to fruition soon, that you locked down the feature set, design, and specs years before. At least that's my experience from my time in the semiconductor industry. So drawing on your experience, what are the biggest lessons learned so far?
Yeah, for sure. It's a minimum 2 years to bring a chip to market, and one like this, it's taken us almost 5. And as I always say, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. So The first thing is just never assume anything when you're going after this, because you got to get it right. The product like this, it's going to take years and millions of dollars to get to market, like a high-end semiconductor. So once we knew the market we were targeting, it was important to then ensure the product market fit. So I reached out to my network and did this with a key decision being which memory technology we should use. That was really the key open-end thing. Fortunately, most of our choices were exactly what customers and OEMs wanted to see for the HPC market. But including them in the process was important. It helped get them bought in early. And most importantly, it gave our team and our investors and board of directors the confidence to move forward with product development.
So I know you, 'cause we've known one another a long time. So I know that you mapped the ecosystem and that you recognize that your core customers would be big computing centers and national labs and OEMs in sectors like aerospace, automotive, and pharma. So knowing what the customer needs and values and how your product delivers, it's pretty essential to creating the positioning, messaging, and the strategy. At what point did you address the value proposition, positioning, and messaging in the go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, that was absolutely the next step. Because not just the target market, but the competitors were and we had engineering off and running. So another nice thing about focusing on HPC was that open source software is highly valued. I learned early in my career that hardware is really just a platform for software. HPC users were the first to adopt
I
the
don't, I
Linux
know if the hardware. I don't know if the hardware guys are going to like that.
Well, they got to keep in mind that it really is all about what these things get used for, right? And
Yes.
without the software and the right applications, they're kind of not a lot of value. Um, so it's important that we all stay humble. So the good news is Linux was out there at HPC first, and the other good thing was 76% of all HPC application software are open source. So that makes it a lot easier to start to get some of these things ported to the platform and get used. And it often the people who lead the charge on doing a lot of that open source software importing are the DOE national labs, universities, and supercomputing centers, including UT TAC here in Austin, the Texas Advanced Computing Center. So they work with these apps all the time and help port them new hardware platforms like our Thunderbird. And then what happens is a lot of big enterprise companies in markets like aerospace, automotive, energy, and pharma, they partner with these organizations and draft off this early work. So getting to the root to work with them was critical. But we also didn't want to ignore the other 24% of software that is commercial. So we have also engaged with some key ISVs in these application areas, especially around computer-aided engineering and multiphysics and those kinds of things. Then to jumpstart the S-curve, we needed to get software development going. So we launched an early access program with select customers. We provided them with simulators and emulators to get going prior to us having actual silicon, and they will be the first to receive the initial Thunderbirds. The ideal scenario, of course, is that these organizations will recommend Thunderbird to these apps or even say they run best on a Thunderbird.
Okay, so you just to kind of do a quick recap, you identified the target market and you identified how you were going to partner with some key players, both through the non-commercial and commercial environment. How were you positioning the Thunderbird? Just if you could articulate, what was sort of the positioning and messaging you had at the start of the process?
Right. So the key is the only real alternative for the last 30 years to doing something like Thunderbird was to find something else. And GPUs have been the main thing, NVIDIA obviously being the leader in this space. But what's happening is twofold. So number one, a lot of applications just will never really adapt to a GPU. It's a total algorithmic rewrite, takes 1 to 2 years typically, and they may or may not benefit at the end. And most estimates by the experts are maybe 30% of applications in this HPC space will ever work on a GPU. So we were after the whole thing because we created an all CPU architecture, which is what most of these software programs were written for, and they could much more easily adapt without a complete algorithmic rewrite. So that lit up a lot of these guys.
So faster time to market because it's
Yep.
CPU based, something they already know, and they
Right.
don't have to put the energy and investment in making algorithmic changes. That sort of
Correct.
was how you were thinking about it, right?
Yes, and then the other thing that was happening at the same time, we saw this happening with AI driving the GPUs to lower and lower precision, as I mentioned earlier. FP4, one analyst is calling those Jensen flops, right? So the HPC market needs, 64-bit high precision, math. So we built an all 64-bit, all CPU architecture. And I've heard a number of customers say, this is what we've wanted for the last 10 or 20 years. Thank God somebody finally did it, right? The world does not need yet another AI accelerator. We need things like this. In fact, there was a company just yesterday, there was an AI chip company that announced they were shutting down. It's a very red ocean, and there's plenty of AI accelerators out there.
Okay,
So yeah.
so again, really, this was about enabling people who need products like this to be able to do it without having to make huge investment and changes to how they like to work, and they could do and adopt relatively quickly in their ability to take their products to market.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's pretty
absolutely.
good positioning. That's
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you.
So
Well, and as it evolved, by the way, we learned the other thing because of our crypto roots. It turns out that focus, it's in our DNA to do low power, energy efficiency, and
yes,
that's become a critical thing the last couple 3 years. You're
yes.
seeing, some of these AI, big data center hyperscaler guys buying nuclear power plants or building nuclear power plants next to their data centers, right? So the fact that we could be, a third of the energy usage of a GPU turned out to be yet another key value prop as we went to market.
Or at least a very important message. Low power has
Yeah,
always been a really important message. So
yeah.
that's an excellent point. So, having launched a lot of products myself, I know a lot goes into successfully bringing an innovative product to market, and this is certainly an innovative product. It's a pretty high stakes endeavor, and research from MIT professional programs found that as many as 95% of new products miss the mark. So, with so much on the line, we know that having a robust go-to-market strategy and the right success measures is more critical than ever. Success depends on what happens long before the product makes it into the market, which I know you know because you've been at this for a few years now. And we refer to this as upstream marketing. That is where customer insights, competitive intelligence, and strategy are addressed early in order to help ensure faster product adoption when the product becomes available in the market. So, what are the most critical steps you have taken in the pre-launch phase to support customers rapidly adopting the product? And how did you engage channel partners, which are some of the folks you mentioned earlier, and technical influencers to build early momentum?
Yeah, for sure. I really like that term, upstream marketing. That's exactly what it really is. Um, so, yeah, we never underestimate, the whole thing. The whole thing. You've got to have, a route to market as well as the right product, right? So, from the ecosystem work, it was clear to me the best go-to-market path for what we were doing was to leverage what works rather than try to, change it or reinvent it. So this meant that our initial product should be a standard PCIe server add-in card, just like GPUs and FPGAs and stuff, that the computer OEMs and integrators would sell. Customers don't typically just buy, compute accelerator cards and pull a server out and, pluck them all out and put new ones in. They typically buy new servers populated with the new cards, and then they deploy them into the center and retire the old ones later. Plus, Linux has also become the de facto data center OS of choice. So the computer OEMs typically ship their servers with Linux. So that was clear that was the best initial route to market. But then the challenge with an indirect model, of course, versus direct sales is they don't work for you. You can't just go pound on your guys, right, to go sell more. So you can only influence and encourage them. Thus, the key was to engage with the OEMs early on in parallel with doing the business development with our target end customers and markets. This let them also have early customer feedback. So they were, in there with us, and they saw firsthand customer reaction to our value propositions. It also built trust because that's the other key in a channel, demonstrating we are committed to an indirect channel by bringing them early and not, just trying to go take deals direct. And then there's the financial aspect. The old saying is salespeople are coin operated, right? So the server OEMs often lament that a compute accelerator card can cost as much as an entire server, and each server usually has many of them installed. 4 or 8 accelerators per server is where things are at right now. So the icing on the cake was that they can get a much higher initial deal size with much better margins by working with us. So we then continue to as well work with early, important industry analysts and various technical press, plus plus participating in key trade shows, right, both here and in the UK and Europe, which is our initial markets that we're targeting.
That makes a lot of sense. And stakeholder engagement is one of the many key success factors in complex products, and that, in everyone in the ecosystem, and that includes those influencers and partners. So you've talked about the importance of getting both technical and business analysts on board well ahead of the launch. And now I know you're focusing on procurement contacts. Those are the people who will actually have to sign the deal. And you've already been engaging the technical people, giving them an opportunity to experience and work with the product in some capacity. So it's a very complex, multi-layered approach to going to market. And I imagine that in order for this to be successful, there has to be a lot of internal and external alignment, both inside the InspireSemi team, with product sales and marketing, but also with your external partners. What are some of the things you have done to ensure this kind of alignment?
Yeah, for sure. Engaging deeper into the OEM partner organizations is really just the next logical step on the journey. This includes, right, continuing to work with the CTO offices and some of the field people, and also now engaging with the server product management teams for validation, and of course, the procurement people. Another good thing about our early access program was it was a paid engagement. So it was a bit of a pipe cleaner to work with those procurement teams and see what they were going to require. One of our early partners was an OEM, actually, because many of them have their own software. For alignment, the real key was getting all of us on board with the strategy initially as we pivoted to HPC from the crypto early days as a leadership team, right? And then the employees. So that was perhaps the easiest part. From an alignment standpoint of sales and marketing, that's kind of easy because I own both. So that kind of happens by default. What took more work was we also had to get our early investors and board of directors to agree and stay committed. We went through multiple early funding rounds, and it was really critical that they were aligned with us on this. And they actually saw the excitement. They saw it was actually an even bigger opportunity than they originally invested in. So that worked out after we had to do a little education of them, right? And it's an ongoing process, with obviously regular board meetings, and also typically quarterly business update webinars for our investors. And of course, having strong analyst press and customer validation is good for all stakeholders, both internal and customers.
Oh, well, I imagine you're going to agree with me on this, Doug. Since we know each other well, better to pivot early than to have to make that pivot after you go to market.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we just again.
It's really not fun to pivot after you've gone to market.
Yeah, the company that shut down yesterday, is a perfect example of that. They tried to pivot to come after us when they realized the real money was in HPC and not AI as a chip company. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you and the members of our community know, at VisionEdge Marketing, we're really passionate about, and maybe some would even say obsessed with, measurement and performance management. And from our prior lives together, I know that that's something we should have in common. And you've shared that you'll be tracking, product adoption rates and OEM pickup rates, which are pretty common in the semiconductor industry as key indicators of go-to-market success. What was the thinking behind some of the performance targets and measures that you've selected?
Yeah, it's early days, but for sure, product adoption is what really kind of drives everything else, right? Since we will be fulfilling through OEMs once we start to ramp. So we'll certainly measure which OEMs work best with us and are most successful, which will also help us determine how to help those who are having troubles or are not focused on us, like the ones who are doing better. For launch, it'll be primarily take up of early units in the different vertical markets they're going into. I have an idea what those will be. And there are a couple areas I want to focus more on to ensure that we have a very diversified mix of industries. because that's one of the beauties of what we've done here with HPC. It's a very horizontal technology that applies to all those verticals we talked about earlier. And so we're not reliant on any one market. And I want to make sure we have that good diversification. So then after that, it's going to be looking for increased availability of software applications in the verticals we're targeting, because that will also show the adoption and the opportunity, the TAM we really can go after here.
In the semiconductor buying journey, simulators, emulators, these are important steps along the way. I imagine you'll set some performance targets for those by industry.
Yeah, I mean, we're not too worried about the simulator emulator because we're now getting close enough to having silicon. We should be shipping product here at the end of September. So I think the early access partners we have, maybe plus one or two others that have kind of come on board in the last month, we'll be working with them on that. Most everybody else is going to be getting, early silicon.
So as you think about those measures of success in the long term, obviously, as we've already said, people buying the chip and putting their application on it, that's the ultimate goal here. But along the journeys, what are some interim indicators that the customer is moving forward in the decision to use the Thunderbird?
Yeah, so clearly, when early access partners are willing to pay like $55,000 each to be in our program, to basically port code for us and be an alpha tester, that's pretty good. And our investors and board really love seeing that. Wow, people are paying even for that. And then we had a whole bunch of people right behind them very early on, very big name companies, big energy, oil and gas companies. Manufacturers and such, who said, we don't want the emulator, but boy, how do we get first boards, right? We want to get these things in here and do some, testing and benchmarking and all that. So we have, a list as well that are right behind that in kind of the first silicon program.
So test boards will be one of the indicators then.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. That's that. So we're going to wrap up. And I know for some of our community, this is pretty technical, but many of the members in our community have complex products. It may not be a semiconductor, but it might be a pharmaceutical product or an energy product or just some complex services. So, and many of them are going to be bringing new products to market. So what advice would you offer other leaders who are launching complex, high-stakes products in a competitive market?
Yeah, so clearly do your homework, right? The upstream marketing is key, like you talked about. Start with your strategy and your high-level market needs and opportunities and threats, right? Map all that out. And then engaging industry analysts to confirm or course correct as needed. We did that early on with the HPC AI ones, but I've been expanding to more general kind of IT industry, because we know, we're going to have to get in not just the technical press, but, CIO magazine, Wall Street Journal, things like that. So you need those analysts on board with you, because, by the way, as you guys probably know, anytime you want to get somebody to write about you in the press, one of the first things they do is they want to have an analyst they can, back channel with, right? And validate what you're saying.
Validation. They want social proof. They want experts and authorities to be able to say, confirm, validate what you're doing. Absolutely. And that's a really important thing that sometimes people are too late in the game to do. And you're saying, do that early.
Do it early. And, we even brought one of them on board, for a contract, an annual contract, to get real numbers. They had some very deep market sizing stuff just for the accelerator card market. One of the other analysts I really liked didn't get to that granular level, but I've started working with him since, because we're far enough along now. But having that market sizing and projection numbers really help the business plan and help secure the investors. So then after that, obviously, you start to engage potential customers and partners as early as you can, bringing them into the process, working both in parallel. So you will have end customers and a sales channel that's primed and ready to fulfill. So this is not just semiconductor. This is anything, as you noted, that's a kind of a complex product as well. And then, of course, lastly, always hire and partner with A players. You've got limited resources. You've got to pick your targets. You really want to pick the good ones, right? And it's always best to have people, with my experience, that kind of been there and done that. They know what works, and just as important, what does not. We sometimes joke, right, that there's some good multi-million-dollar lessons from mistakes made by big companies in many industries, and you just can't afford those when you're a small company. So.
Exactly. Well, I'm not sure they can afford them either. That's a conversation for another day, since we can relate to that. So I
Yep.
really appreciate you taking us behind the scenes of the go-to-market strategy and a new product launch. And I think the key message is start as soon as you possibly can. Doing a really good launch and strategy, do all the upstream work, get customers engaged early. Once you identify who they are, leverage the ecosystem and all the players in the ecosystem, all of the things that are important, and they take time. They don't happen overnight, and it takes preparation and a really good plan. We hope that your new product is a huge success and that it becomes an industry standard. Having helped create several industry standards in my career, I know that will be really important to InspireSemi. And I'm confident that our community will take away at least one good idea for building a data-driven, customer-centric go-to-market strategy. Thank you very much, Doug.
Thank you, Laura. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. We hope you found this episode of What's Your Edge really helpful. And since 1999, VisionEdge Marketing has been helping our customers solve the most difficult challenges when it comes to using data, analytics, process, and measurement to accelerate growth, create customer value, and improve performance. We always welcome hearing from you.